happy to be here at the ending stretch of this Brazil tour. It's been really a privilege to have you guys follow our content online. We've been to Brasília, the capital of Brazil. We got to hang out with a bunch of really cool young Seventh-day Adventist people. Then I took a stroll in Bahia. We also went to Belo Horizonte and saw a little bit of the artwork for Artificial Hearts. And now we got to end our journey on the home stretch here in Pará. We did some really great recordings with James Standish and David Little at the Union headquarters of the North Brazil Union. And now I'm really proud to conclude our journey with these really two esteemed gentlemen, Nicholas P. Miller, all the way from Washington, D.C., and Alexis Artaud-de-la-Ferriere, all the way from London, England. And I wanted to begin asking them, how has the experience been in Brazil? I know it's been really intense. We've had a really energizing weekend here at the Adventist University of the Amazon. Very inspiring. I personally was very inspired by all the talks that we had. We got to go to the G20 and also dialogue with some of the key leaders and advocates of religious freedom who are going to present a document to the G20, the organization of the 20 countries in the UN. So how has your experience here been in Brazil, seeing the country, the food, and also these events that we participated in discussing religious freedom?
Yes, it's been great to be here. It's really been a whirlwind. We, of course, started with the pre-meetings to the G20 this week, and it was a very eclectic gathering of scholars from Europe, from America, from Brazil, meeting with scholars here and indigenous representatives, both of indigenous peoples as well as Afro-Brazilian people groups and religions. And I have to say that the dialogue we had was truly eye-opening and profound. I've been to lots of scholarly meetings before, but I think this was one of the first times that we've had scholars meet with people on the ground who are actually experiencing discrimination and persecution in rather dramatic ways. Go ahead. Well, just to hear firsthand their stories brought to life the importance of the principles that we were discussing.
I mean, it's just been such a rich few days for me, and for me it's been kind of displacing, or it's been a discovery in two ways. One, the discovering Brazil, how diverse, how immense, how rich, how full, how it kind of takes you by all the senses. But also discovering the Adventist world. So, I mean, I've known Nick for a few years now, and it's always been a pleasure to see him, to speak with him, exchange with him. And I know a bit of the Adventist tradition through Nick, but to spend a couple days here at this campus, to share in Vespers here and Sabbath here, it's been really a discovery for me, so it's been fantastic.
Well, how do you think that events like these, we were first at the G20 event on the Interreligious Forum, and then now we're here at more of a confessional institution, but still doing an event on religious liberty. How do you think these events have helped you or will help you in kind of the work that you do in religious liberty in Europe and in North America, in light of some of the challenges that you have in those parts of the world?
Well, I think it's almost a necessary combination, right? We met with a small group, these pre-G20 meetings, scholars, representatives of individuals, talking about, some very real problems, but also abstract principles. And I think we came to some good ideas and good insights. But we can't change the world from inside an ivory tower or a room far removed from the people. And the experience we had here this weekend with vibrant young people singing songs, sharing with us and each other, is the way that you take these ideas from the world of experts and you bring them on the ground and you show their importance to people in the pew, to the common people, to church leaders, and to try to bridge and bring together those two worlds, I think, is something that you have to do if you want to make religious liberty and these principles real.
Yeah, I kind of think of three kind of vectors or three kind of moments that can be helpful. One is as scholars to exchange, to challenge our own ideas, our own a priori assumptions, both by speaking to scholars with whom we disagree, but also by hearing from people kind of on the ground, representatives of civil society, their stories and experiences. So that's, we enrich ourselves, we get to refine our ideas. Then the second aspect is to kind of bring that message, or to communicate that message of religious liberty as we see it to kind of people on the ground, to people in this university, to people in different parishes, so that they can kind of get the idea that it's not just an abstract philosophy, or it's not just for people in NGOs or in elected positions. It's something that we all need to practice and advance in our everyday lives. And then the third is there needs to be a conduit of communication between academics, civil society, and elected representatives. Mm-hmm. And so that's that third aspect that we're trying to achieve through the G20 and through drafting these guidelines.
And you actually, I mean, maybe just to clarify to our viewers, you had a very important role in drafting a very specific paragraph on religious education, right?
Yeah, so education is one of the things that I think is really important. I think it's important generally, but it's particularly important for religious communities because education is the primary way by which a tradition is transmitted from one generation to another. And there is no culture or religion, there is no viable idea of how to live a particular form of life without being able not only to speak about those ideas or expose those ideas, but to be able to teach those ideas, as I say, within a tradition. Young people need to be able to see that a traditional, cultural, or religious way of life is something which is alive. It's something which exists within a holistic kind of environment. So I think it's really important that we recognize what we call group autonomy for religious organizations and certain cultural minorities, so that they might not only transmit ideas, but they can teach within their tradition, that they can keep those ideas, those forms of life, those practices alive throughout the generations.
They live the ideas, just like we saw this weekend with all these young people involved in the city and the program.
Oh, fantastic. And on that note, I wanted to transition a little bit to our viewers know, right? Artificial Hearts is a podcast dedicated to disseminating the works of Fyodor Dostoevsky to the West and humanizing and warming those hearts that have become cold by secular humanism. And one of my favorite quotes from this book is here. If we can show it here. Thanks, Alexis. If anything does preserve society, even in our time, and does regenerate and transform the criminal, it is only the law of Christ operating on the human conscience. If there was something that we talked a lot about in this event, it was the importance of freedom of religion and freedom of religious conscience. And I think in light of this sentence that we just read, I think one major theme in our conference was avoiding the extremes, avoiding the extreme of Christian nationalism, and also avoiding the extreme of this secular humanism that alienates persons of faith, that threatens, like Alexis alluded to, these religious institutions. So my question is, what is the importance of a public morality today in our society, and how can we maybe avoid? I know this is something we kind of go the whole night, but we have less than 10 minutes. How can we maybe just have like a few steps that we can implement in our own communities to avoid this extreme of like the Christian nationalism that we're seeing rising, and also this secular humanism. And I think we're very privileged here because we have a Protestant Seventh-day Adventist Christian, we have a Roman Catholic. I think all of us here are committed to combating these extremes and building a society where people can live together and coexist in harmony despite their theological, political, and philosophical differences.
So there's a lot there. I mean, I love Dostoevsky, and I love this idea that Dostoevsky has. It's, I think, a bit like the different brothers Karamazov, who, you know, they all inhabit all of us. You see tensions with him as well, because although he has this principle, he's also a bit of a Christian nationalist. I mean,
right.
As a Catholic, Dostoevsky had very harsh things to say about Catholicism, but he also had a very kind of robust idea of the Russian nation. At the same time, he had this very humanistic or this very Christian view of the salvific message of Christ. And I think I would read, as a Catholic, I would read that quote in kind of two ways. Well, there's the revealed law, but there's also the natural law which is inscribed in all of our hearts. And that natural law which precedes revelation, which John Henry Newman kind of he describes in terms of conscience, allows us to recognize the humanity and brotherhood that we share in people beyond our own confessional limits. And I think that's also something that we need to keep in mind when we're, you know, talking, interacting with people with whom we disagree, but also when we see that their rights or their life flourishing is being limited, that we share something fundamental with them, and that we have duties towards them.
I think that's well stated. I mean, the Brothers Karamazov is the book where the vignette with the Grand Inquisitor happens, isn't it? And I do think it's the story of Christ himself coming to Russia and being pulled before the Grand Inquisitor of the Church. Spain. Oh, the story is told in Spain by the Russian author. And Christ is proffering freedom, but the Grand Inquisitor is arguing that people don't really want freedom. They want security and they want safety. And that ultimately the Grand Inquisitor, he recognizes who Christ is, but thinks his gift of freedom is too dangerous. And marks him off for removal, if you will. And so I think in the end that Dostoevsky sees ultimately the problems with Christian nationalism and the use of force in matters of religion, and that as long as we live in a sinful, fallen human world, people will be fearful enough to use force to stamp out true religion and religious belief and religious freedom. So the law of Christ is something that, especially in its revealed state, has to be accepted by the criminal for it to make a change in the criminal's life. You can enforce a certain kind of outward morality, but you cannot enforce an inward spirituality. And I think that's the difference between the Christian nationalism, which is seeking to enforce an inward spirituality, versus a healthy concern for civil morality that can bring peace and safety to a society, but not righteousness.
Yeah, I mean, about the Grand Inquisitor, the way you describe it is absolutely correct. And I think one of the ways of understanding the mistake that the Inquisitor makes is that he starts with an imposition of a morality on the other, or he starts by being worried with political or structural questions, rather than being concerned with his first-person obligations or his first-person ethic, or do I imitate Christ? And I think that's actually, I see that as being indicative of a lot of our problems here today, from different areas of the political spectrum. That we're very focused on what should you do, how should the structures change. Well, yes, those are relevant, but I think we can only have an authentic ethical, kind of substantively Christian answer to those questions if we first ask, what should I do? How do I follow Christ? How do I imitate Christ?
We have changed hearts, or artificial hearts, maybe, from God.
Excellent. Well, amazing. And before we go to the last question, I had the privilege of meeting Alexis at this conference. Really cool guy. I have a good relationship with Dr. Miller, and I want to just thank you for the opportunity to be here to participate in this event. And Alexis actually has a very interesting relationship with the Brothers Karamazov. I don't know if he would be okay like sharing a little bit of the story of his name and his connection to the Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah, so I mean, my dad once told me, how true this is, I cannot say, that he was thinking of the youngest brother, Alyosha, when he named me Alexis.
Who's on this mug, right? And a little merchandise. Faith does not and the real is free from the miracle, but the miracle from faith. So, and I think you really live up to this character. I think you're a servant of religious freedom, and we're really grateful for you embodying these principles of love, of freedom, and Christ-like love in our society. And may you continue to be an Alyosha in society as an academic and also as a Christian in your community. And to wrap up these final 3 minutes that we have, what is one issue in religious liberty or church-state relations that we're not talking about, but that we should be talking about?
Well, that's a very good question. I suppose I spend a lot of my time in the United States talking about issues of sexuality and gender. We didn't really talk about that meaningfully this weekend, but I think that the very question of human nature and what it is to be human and the male-female bipole of that is being called into question by secular society. And, you know, we, as Adventists, we are fond of talking of the Sabbath, and that's one of the institutions from Eden, but the other institution from Eden is marriage, which rests on this male-female expression of the image of God. And I do think that we should be spending as much time and effort on that question as we do on the Sabbath, because in some ways, male, female, and marriage is more fundamental to both humanity and society than Sabbath has been. And it deserves our attention, and we need to protect our institutions and communities in being able to live in the way that we believe God has called us to.
I suppose I'd answer the question a bit indirectly. I would say that the challenge is we don't speak kind of in the ether, in the abstract. We're all speaking within particular groups or communities. So I think it's, you know, wherever we're inscribed socially, whatever groups we're part of, the question is, what are we not speaking about in those places? Because, you know, sexuality is something which is very much spoken about in certain places by certain people. So I think we need to be attentive to what's important for other people outside of our circles. What are we missing kind of on a daily basis with those people with whom we're comfortable? And that's true for me personally, and that's true for others with whom I might disagree or who don't share my circle.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure speaking with you here on the podcast. It's been a pleasure also getting to know you more through these meetings and these conferences. And I just want to encourage you, if you're watching us, if you enjoy our content, if you want to see content like you saw from these two amazing gentlemen, please don't forget to like our social media platform. Please don't forget to like us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Rumble, and please support this message. Like I said, our official hearts, we want to reanimate the West with the timeless truths of Christianity, and by disseminating these valuable, precious truths of freedom and of religious liberty and freedom of conscience. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye for now, and I will see you all back in the U.S.